I'm Hale Stewart, and I'm with Hale Stewart Law, which is where finance, economics, and law meet. And this is Insurance University. It's a series of short videos I've put together to help insureds understand what their policies cover. And I did this for a very simple reason. Most insureds have absolutely no idea what their policies cover. It's not their fault. Okay. Unlike every other commercial contract out there, with the insurance relationship, you pay a premium, and then you get your policy on a take-it-or-leave-it basis 30, 60 days later. So as a result, you get the policy, you take the policy, you put it in the lower right-hand drawer of your desk, and you never read it again until you file a claim, at which point you might find out you don't have the coverage you thought you had. So hopefully, this will help to prevent that from happening. Before I jump into the nuts and bolts here, two things. First of all, this video does not establish an attorney-client relationship. And point number two, while I do everything I can to look at the camera, I will look away because I've got some notes down here, and I've got a copy of a pollution policy right here that I'll be reading from. So I apologize in advance for looking away. Now, all that being said, before we get into the guts of the pollution policy, you need to know two things. First of all, brief history of environmental law, which is that in the 1950s and 1960s, this area of law was a state and local phenomenon. But that changed in the early 1970s when Congress passed a number of laws that federalized environmental rules and regulations and also created the EPA, which is tasked with enforcing these particular laws. A second thing is that in the 1960s, companies began to try and apply the commercial general liability policy to some pollution-like causes of action. The problem was that back then, the CGL applied to an accident. Now, some courts define an accident as a short-term event. Two cars, a car accident. They hit, the situation lasts 3 to 5 seconds. But a pollution incident is actually much longer in developing. So some courts said that is not an accident, some courts did. Well, that led to a bunch of very complex, convoluted legal issues that are way beyond what I want to talk about here. But it did two things. First of all, it led to the creation of the pollution policy in the early 1970s, and eventually it led to the creation of the pollution exclusion, which prevents the CGL from applying to pollution issues. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's talk about 4 keywords to this particular insurance policy. Now, like every other policy out there, there's some key definitions that we have to understand. The first of these is pollutant. Okay? Now, pollutant means any solid, liquid, gaseous, or thermal irritant. So basically, it's anything that possible that could leave your particular location and go somewhere else. Now, something to remember here is that there's a list of federally stated pollutants on the EPA's website and in the federal statute. And the EPA does have the ability to create, to make a new substance a pollutant for legal purposes. Now, a pollutant has to cause what's called a pollution incident. And that means an emission, discharge, release, or escape of pollutants into or upon land, the atmosphere, or any watercourse or body of water. So any pollutant, again, EPA stated, hits air, land, or water. So any natural substance that's possible. And that has to cause environmental damage. Again, another term of art for this particular policy. Love that page flipping sound there. Environmental damage means injurious presence in or upon land, the atmosphere, or any watercourse of body of a solid, liquid, gaseous, or thermal contaminants, irritants, or pollutants. So the pollutant leaves your particular location, your site, and it causes some kind of harm to air, land, or water. Now, finally, there are cleanup costs. And cleanup costs simply means the expenses for the removal or neutralization of contaminants, irritants, or pollutants. Now, how do you become aware of this? Well, with the commercial general liability policy, it's a suit. Someone files a case, a cause of action against you in the courts. But this creates an interesting issue because sometimes a governmental body won't sue you. They'll send you an official letter. So that leads to an interesting question. Does this policy apply to that letter or not? Key issue here. In some states, the answer is yes. In some states, the answer is no. So if you have a pollution-related exposure, you have to understand how your state deals with that particular issue. All that being said, let's now flip to some key phrases in the insuring language. Okay? The insurance applies to bodily injury or property damage caused by a pollution incident. So there's some kind of injurious presence on the land, it harms property or body, and it's brought to your attention by a suit. And again, go back to that particular issue I talked about earlier with suit and state law. In addition, cleanup costs. And this leads to an interesting point because here it says the insuring agreement is the reimbursement of mandated off-site cleanup costs. Reimburse is a key issue in this policy. That means the insurance company pays you back. So that also means that you're on the hook for the expenses, and then you submit invoices to the insurance company and they pay you back. Now the insurance company will pay for cleanup costs that the insurer becomes legally obligated to pay because of environmental damage. Now all that being said, those are the basic nuts and bolts of the pollution policy. Okay? In reality, this policy is very company and fact and circumstances specific. Now, if you have this policy and this particular risk, you know that. And you know some of the twists and turns that are related to your specific industry. However, I hope this video gives you, at least in general, a good overview of what this particular policy covers, along with the risk of the reimbursing structure. Should you have any other questions, please call me at 832-330-4101. I hope you found this video very helpful, and thank you very much for watching.